Echoes of Burnell. Prologue. The night enveloped the town of Burnell in a darkness so profound that it seemed to distort reality itself, a darkness in which shadows stretched unnaturally, as if they aspired to consume the very fabric of the world. Nestled in the valley between jagged, imposing mountains, Burnell lay dormant, forgotten by the broader world, but not beyond the grasp of time's inexorable advance. The past had never loosened its grip on Burnell, and now the weight of forgotten moments was about to catch up. The peculiar nature of Burnell's geography only added to its sense of timelessness. No one could quite explain why the mountains always felt so close, their peaks looming ominously as though bending down to observe the lives within. Some locals swore the mountains moved closer at night, leaning in to whisper ancient secrets carried by the wind. The peaks loomed with a dark majesty, indifferent to the fragile humanity below. When the wind blew just right, it carried with it echoes, sounds that didn't seem to belong in the mortal world. They were strange things, indistinct voices, distant cries, or sometimes something far more unsettling. These echoes reverberated with an otherworldly resonance, their origins forever shrouded in mystery. Most of Burnell's inhabitants had learned to disregard them, dismissing them as figments of a fearful imagination, mere tricks played by the wind on dark, restless nights. But tonight the town would have no such reprieve. Tonight they would be forced to listen, to confront the echoes that haunted the spaces between what was known and what should never be known. Chapter 1. The Visitor. 12 miles outside of Burnell, where the woods grow dense and the roads are thin, a car broke down. Peter Collins, a travelling salesman with too many years on his shoes and not enough money in his pocket, stood in the rain, cursing at his flat tire. He glanced at his watch. It had stopped at 11:57 p.m. the moment his car died. "Just my luck," he muttered, looking at the trees as if they might care. They stood silent and tall, ancient witnesses to his plight. The branches swayed slightly in the breeze, making shadows dance across the road in flickering, unsettling patterns. His eyes caught a flicker of movement, a shadow that darted too quickly among the trees. He blinked, and it was gone. Peter shivered, pulled his coat tighter and trudged down the road, hoping to find help. He didn't notice how the shadows behind him seemed to bend and follow, like they were alive, curious about this intruder. After what felt like hours but was really minutes, he saw a house standing alone at the edge of a clearing. It looked like something plucked from another time, weather-beaten but oddly stately, with a porch that sagged under the weight of years. A single lantern glowed in the window, casting a halo of light that barely touched the darkness. Peter knocked, half expecting no answer. Instead, the door creaked open on its own, revealing a hallway that seemed to stretch far longer than the house's outer dimensions suggested. The light from the lantern flickered, casting uneasy shadows that shifted as if they were alive. "Hello?" Peter called out, stepping inside. "Anyone here?" He noticed the air inside was thick, almost tangible, like walking through cobwebs. It smelled of burnt wood and something sour, like rotten fruit. The door shut behind him, echoing through the house like a distant, mocking laugh that made Peter jump and whirl around. That's when he heard it. A voice. Low, unsteady, but somehow melodic, drifting from a room at the end of the hall. It seemed to float on the air, slipping past Peter's ears and nestling uncomfortably in his mind. "Welcome, Peter Collins." Chapter 2. The Stranger and the Room. Peter froze. The voice shouldn't have known his name. He turned toward the sound, and his feet moved against his better judgment. The hallway seemed to stretch longer with every step, the floorboards creaking beneath his weight. The shadows along the walls deepened, writhing like something alive, shifting just beyond the edge of sight. The room at the end of the hall was circular, walls lined with tall, arched windows that revealed nothing but pitch black outside. In the centre, a chair faced away from him, and a figure sat in it. It was a man, or at least it appeared to be, thin, almost skeletal, draped in a dark suit that seemed too large for his frame. The man turned slowly, revealing a gaunt face with eyes that were too bright, too alive for his emaciated features. His lips curled into something that could have been a smile or a sneer. "I've been waiting for you, Peter." "Look, I don't want any trouble," Peter said, stepping back. "My car broke down. I just need to." "You've come to the right place," the man interrupted. His voice was smooth, almost hypnotic, and Peter found it difficult to look away from those bright eyes. "I know why you're here. They all come for the same thing." Peter's mouth went dry. "They? Whoa!" The stranger ignored the question and reached into his coat, pulling out an old pocket watch. It swung on a chain. Its tick, 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 the only sound in the room. The ticking seemed to echo, louder and louder, filling the empty space between Peter's thoughts. "This place is a door, Peter. A door to places you cannot imagine, to echoes of lives that never were and never should be. And you, Peter, you have the privilege of being my latest guest." The watch's ticking grew louder, filling Peter's mind until he thought his skull would crack. He pressed his hands to his ears, but the sound burrowed deeper, carrying with it a chorus of whispers. His own voice among them, speaking of regrets and forgotten hopes. Images flashed before his eyes, moments from his past, faces long gone, choices he had buried deep. He stumbled back, and when he opened his eyes again, the room was gone. Chapter 3. The Town That Wasn't. Peter found himself standing in the middle of Burnell, but it was different. The town looked new, as if time had spun backward. The streets were clean, the buildings freshly painted, and the people moved with an energy he hadn't seen in years. People walked the streets, faces he recognized but somehow couldn't place. He called out to a woman he knew from the grocery store, but she walked right through him, a cold shiver passing over his skin. He looked down at his hands. They were fading, turning translucent like smoke. Panic surged, tightening his chest. He ran through the streets, trying to touch anyone, to grab something solid, but everything slipped through his grasp like mist, his fingers passing through people, walls, everything. A voice echoed in his mind. "You are an echo now, Peter. Nothing but a memory that time forgot." Peter stopped, catching his breath. He saw himself across the street, his younger self, laughing with a woman he had once loved. They looked happy, carefree, and Peter remembered this moment, remembered how he had chosen his job over her, chosen the road over a life. He tried to shout, to warn himself, but his voice came out like the wind, a hollow, keening sound that seemed to fade before it even reached his lips. His younger self turned and looked straight through him, a shiver passing over his face, as if he had heard a ghost. "That's what you are," the stranger's voice whispered in his ear, an echo of a choice that can never be undone. The world around Peter shifted, the streets of Burnell blurring and twisting. He saw other versions of the town, some thriving, others decayed and abandoned. In one version, Burnell was engulfed in flames, people running and screaming. In another, the town was buried under snow, eerily silent. Each version flickered and faded, overlapping, a kaleidoscope of what could have been. Chapter 4. The Price. Peter returned to the house. He didn't know how long it took, but time felt meaningless now. The stranger waited for him, the pocket watch still swinging, the ticking a constant reminder of something Peter couldn't quite grasp. "Why?" Peter demanded, though his voice was barely a rasp. "Why show me all this?" The stranger's smile was thin, like a scar carved across his face. "To remind you, Peter, every choice leaves an echo. Every regret, every forgotten dream, it carves a little slice of reality. And this house, this place, it's where those slices come together." He gestured toward the windows, and Peter saw them now, dozens of scenes playing out in the glass like old film reels. Different versions of Burnell, different versions of Peter. In one, he had stayed with the woman. In another, he had never become a salesman. In yet another, he was a stranger entirely, a man with different hopes and dreams, different regrets. Peter's mind twisted at the sight, struggling to comprehend the weight of all the possibilities. He felt dizzy, as if the world beneath him was shifting, as if he might fall through the cracks of reality. "You could stay here, you know," the stranger continued, his voice almost gentle. "You could slip into another life, forget this place, forget the choices you made." Peter hesitated. He felt the pull of those other lives, the weight of all the paths he had not taken. He saw glimpses of himself, happy and fulfilled, living lives he had only dreamed of. But there was a darkness there too, something cold and hungry, lurking behind the walls of reality, something that watched and waited. "No," he whispered, finding some last thread of resolve. "I'll face my regrets. I won't become one." The stranger's expression hardened, and the watch stopped swinging. The room around them cracked, reality bending like shattered glass, the images in the windows fracturing and splintering away. "Then you've made your choice, Peter, but know this, choices like yours have a price." The stranger's voice seemed to echo, overlapping on itself, becoming a cacophony that drowned out Peter's thoughts. The world around him twisted, folding in on itself, until all Peter could see was darkness. Epilogue: The Echo Left Behind. Burnell woke the next morning to find an abandoned car on the edge of town, but no one ever found Peter Collins. Most folks figured he had moved on, like so many others. Only old Mrs. Hartley, who lived closest to the woods, claimed she could hear a voice on certain nights, a voice that sounded like Peter, calling out from the darkness. She told the story to anyone who would listen, but no one paid her much mind. After all, echoes were just that, nothing but sounds from the past fading away into the void. But sometimes, late at night, if you stood real quiet and listened just right, you could hear the wind whispering through the mountains, carrying with it the last lonely words of a man who chose to face his regrets and found himself lost in the echoes of time. And if you listen too long, you might find that those whispers start to sound a lot like your own voice. Because Burnell isn't just a place you visit, it's a place that remembers. And it's a place that waits for the next traveller, the next lost soul, the next echo to add to its collection.